Hello, everybody. It is Renee, and I am here today with Sherie Holland, and she is from Recontrol Health and Nutrition, and she is back in Missouri. Is that correct, Sherie?
It's Mississippi.
Mississippi, sorry. All the states that I've never been to. But yeah, so I'm from California. I'm out here in Northern California in Los Gatos. And Sherie has been a great help to me. She's also a health coach and clinic owner, and she does a variety of things. And what I love about her clinic is she's really helping people heal themselves from the inside out. And that's my focus this year in really talking about some things that maybe we don't always know about, or subjects that we hear. We hear about vitamin D, we hear about our thyroid, we hear about our metabolism, but we don't really know, what to listen to, what to think about. So, Sherie, introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll start talking about all these fun subjects.
Yeah, well, real quick, I live in Oxford, Mississippi. I've had the clinic for about 10 years, but my journey started really about 12 or 13 years ago. I won't go into all those details because it's quite long, but ultimately I do what I do today, which is teach more natural ways to kind of improve our overall health, because I had to live it. I had a lot of health issues years ago, which then when it started, I was primarily focused on the amount of weight that I was gaining. Of course, chronic fatigue, there was no diagnosis, everything was normal, which in and of itself is a great thing, that everything's normal, that means nothing's wrong. But sadly enough, I did not feel normal at all, or if that was normal, I didn't want to be that. So, I struggled for many, many years. I mean, going all the way back to high school. Hindsight's 2020, with some serious health issues. So, people often think that they're healthy because they don't have, a diagnosis, but that's not necessarily true. So I had a lot of symptoms early on in life of some, pretty significant issues, but there was no diagnosis. So going back to what I do now is really, I started, about 10 years ago, trying to lose weight. I was gaining weight quickly. They had removed half my thyroid, even though it was normal. And that snowballed out of control with a lot of health issues. But so my journey was, I got to lose weight. I just need to do whatever it takes to lose weight. And that's where my focus was. And that's fine at the time, because that was primarily what mattered to me, ignoring the other, cascade of events that was occurring. But so I found, an ideal protein clinic nearby and started that process, and had, tremendous results quite quickly. And I was stunned because I actually wasn't eating less, it was weird because I wasn't counting calories and all this stuff. So I had wonderful results. And that started me questioning what just happened, that I could lose 15 pounds in 3 weeks. That's insane, because I'm not eating more, I'm not eating less than I was. There's no real calorie difference. But so that's where the questions started. And I'm a big proponent of always ask questions, always ask questions, always ask questions. And don't stop until you find, the answer. But along the journey, it shifted from just losing weight to, why can I not keep this off when I quit the diet? Why am I continuing to have these problems come back, particularly when I'm so strict? I have to be so strict with the plan, and the plan works, but I have no, kind of wiggle room for what to do after, even following, what the recommended maintenance plan was. And so again, it's a journey. It's a journey. The journey's not over. It never will be. But I discovered that, a lot of the things I was struggling with, and I think that's why I'm still in weight loss today, because it affects me. I am just like the clients I see. I have to be very particular with what I eat, but yeah, it's an ongoing process, but it shifted at some point because I realized it's really not the certain weight that I'm going for. Now, I wish I could say it was this aha moment, but it was not. But it was a level of, at some point, you know what, it really isn't about the scale for me at this point. I want to wake up feeling like I slept, and I want to be able to go through the day without having to reach for coffee or energy drinks, or, be able to have the energy to meet it, to do what I need to do and want to do, not just need to do, but want to do for the entire day, and continue that process. So it became a bigger issue of, why do I have all these symptoms? And for me, it boils down to the weight, or the inability to lose weight, or even for some people, the inability to gain weight when they need to, is really a symptom, and not necessarily something that we need to start, attacking in and of itself. It's a bigger picture. And so I mentioned before about having the surgery to remove half the thyroid. Again, hindsight's 2020. I discovered that although it took probably 2 decades to get diagnosed, I actually did have, thyroid, quite significant thyroid problems, despite being told it was normal. The lab tests were normal for years. So sum that up, what I do today as a health coach, primarily because I had to learn for myself. It was self-preservation. And so because I was learning, I had to share, with other people, because I saw this same thing was happening to others, and it's still happening today, where people have normal thyroid function, and they have a nodule and they're getting it surgically removed. That's the first line of treatment. And I know now today that should not have been the first line of treatment. And sadly, it still is the first line of treatment. So I really just teach to be a messenger of hope and options. It matters not to me what somebody chooses to do when it comes to their health. It matters to me that they know options. And sadly, I don't think people know options. And so that's really kind of what my mission is to be, just a messenger, really, a messenger. Hope mostly, but just know your options. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. If you are on here live, give us a hashtag live. Tell us where you're from. And of course, if you have questions about thyroid, metabolism, and we're actually going to add a little thing in here and talk a little bit about vitamin D also today. Tell us your questions. I see here that we have Deb is on here from Kansas. Great to see you, Deb. She's a longtime watcher. So, you just touched on a little thing, that, gets me also, is I have a client who said, oh my gosh, she's got a lot of different other health problems, but, they've diagnosed me with a nodule on my thyroid. And, of course, remember that in this country, doctors get paid by prescribing and cutting. So working with a naturopath, an integrative practitioner, a person, somebody that specializes in all this is so important, and that really is available to you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the thyroid, and I love the thing. Oh, I can tell when a client comes in, they're low energy, they're sluggish, they can't lose weight, they can't maintain their weight. I'm like, have you had your thyroid checked? Oh yeah, absolutely, I'm normal. And there's nothing more frustrating, because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I can't send you out to look at labs, and all I can say is you need to talk to, here's a card. These are practitioners that I know will really get to the bottom of this. And of course, they always say, okay, I will. And they don't, because they're normal. So let's talk about normal and what normal means and what it means to different people.
Well, sadly, normal means not well today. That sums it up, really. And what I've learned to say to people is, if you're normal, then would you like to be optimal? Because if normal feels this way, perhaps we should try to do better than that. And full disclosure here, I do want to make the comment that doctors are kind of limited in their practices on what they can officially test for because of insurance regulations. Now, I'm no expert on that, but I just want to make that comment that they do have certain tests that they just cannot run if the standard test, which is TSH, is in those lab normal ranges. So this is where we have to kind of be respectful of what they're dealing with too, because I'm sure it's as frustrating for them as it is for us, because they're kind of stuck too. But as patients and people in this country, most states, we have the ability to have patient requested lab testing done. So there's a few states that don't allow it. I think New York is one of them. I'm not going to mention any other ones because I can't recall off the top of my head. But many states have what's called walk-in labs. So any lab now, there's multiple names for these places. Even online, you can order from Ulta Labs your own test. And we have to remember that this is not an expense. This is an investment, because you're looking for potential, I don't want to say problems, but not optimal. You're not in the optimal. So it really is wise to invest in this. Another thing I tell my clients is, if that test, when we're talking about full thyroid function, and I'll touch on that in a little bit, if it comes back and shows you have thyroid antibodies, you can take those tests back to your practitioner, and then they have reason to actually perform tests because you have flagged for that on another lab test. So we have a little wiggle room when it comes to kind of self-care. But ultimately, we do really want to work with somebody that's knowledgeable about thyroid health, overall health, particularly if your hope is to get kind of holistic care. We want to be optimal, not just normal. So that's the one thing. But thyroid symptoms are across the board. So this is true for hyper and hypo, and then many people are familiar with what's called Graves' disease, which is where the person has an autoimmune attack on their thyroid. So, and it presents as hyperthyroid. But a lot of people aren't familiar with the name Hashimoto's, which is the autoimmune attack on the thyroid. So it's the same as Graves', it just presents differently. So in these people, they present with all the symptoms of hypothyroidism, so low thyroid function. So remember, the symptoms are: hypo is everything's kind of slow and sluggish, dry, fingernails don't grow, you lose hair. Hyper is kind of the opposite, but they can cross the symptom profile. So we don't, this is why testing is so important. I'll give an example. I had a client, she knew she had Hashimoto's, so she was actually just coming to our walk-in lab for a recheck for herself. And her TSH, which again is the standard thyroid test, which means thyroid stimulating hormone, it's not actually a thyroid test. It's a test of the pituitary. The pituitary secretes, that's in the brain, secretes TSH. So we're not actually checking what's going on in the thyroid when we're just checking TSH. And with that test alone, we don't know what's happening cellularly. So we're cellular beings. If you're not getting energy into the cell, you're in trouble. I mean, that's where all the goods happen is cellularly. But she came in and her TSH was absolutely beautiful. But her thyroid antibodies were off the chart. And what I've seen often is people that do have lots of symptoms. They're kind of a walking billboard of hypothyroidism, they go and have the standard test, and it may just be TSH. It might include T4, which is an inactive thyroid hormone, but they never have the thyroid antibodies checked. And they actually do have Hashimoto's, but that won't be caught on a TSH for maybe a decade or more. So people can literally be struggling for years. I mean, for myself, it was many, many years with that normal thyroid. So the problem today is the standard thyroid tests are not good. They're subpar. They're not up to date with what science is telling us. Even more so than that, when you do find somebody that will run those tests, they often don't know what to do because there's no real pharmaceutical to prescribe for something like Hashimoto's. Sadly, in Graves, they want to either kill it or, with radiated iodine or surgically remove it, which, is tragic because then the person's left hypothyroid forever. By the way, they still have Graves. We haven't removed the autoimmune condition. We've just removed kind of the indicator when we surgically remove, a specific body part. We have to remember we're not individual body parts that work like a machine. Where the blood goes, it goes everywhere. So it works synergetically together. It's a beautiful process. And we are designed to heal. When we have the proper information, the body just heals beautifully. But it does, we have to focus on not just the physical, but the emotional and spiritual as well. So we are whole, holistic beings. So all of those parts, matter when it comes to how we take care of ourselves. And we are the experts to our body. So I want to make sure people know that you hire your practitioner if they're not helping you. But that being said, you must be doing what they ask you to do. So it's a relationship. It's not they fix you. We are the actual healers. Nobody heals us. We do that ourselves. But when you hire a practitioner, whether it's an allopathic practitioner or a naturopathic practitioner, it's a relationship. So we need to follow their advice. But if we're not getting the results that we desire, we have the ability to hire another practitioner to help us. But support is huge. So I don't go by this loyalty thing when it comes to medical care.
Totally agree with you. I had a client come in the other day that said, well, I've been seeing the same doctor for 20 years. And I'm like, well, that doctor's not helping you.
It's not working.
It's time to change. And guess what? At different stages of our process, we need different kinds of practitioners. So I remember when I was diagnosed with Graves back in 2004, absolutely. They told me most likely we will radiate your thyroid or we will cut it out. And I immediately got online and, most people would be like, okay. And I immediately got online and started reading and I was like, oh no, no, I'm never letting anybody do that to me.
We want to vilify Dr. Google. And sometimes it can be a dangerous place. I will admit there are topics that I've had with clients before that I will say, please do not Google this because it will take you down a rabbit hole and I don't need you to be there mentally. It's not because I'm trying to hide information from them. It just gets so dark so quick based on what that topic is that I'm like, just let me send you some information. Don't
the right articles. Yeah.
Right.
Well, Google has transformed itself since 2004 for sure. We have a question here, Sherie. And I know Sherie Slinker Vaughn is an ideal protein coach. She says perfect timing. Fighting Hashimoto's anti-TPO is 900, diagnosed in November and under holistic care. Do you recommend a protocol for Hashimoto's? And I know that when I saw on the owner's group, she said she was doing a reboot. She was feeling better doing a reboot. Finding limited gluten-free products. So is there some certain kind of maybe a phase 1 protocol that you would help, have any recommendations about?
I think the standard, protocol, the ideal protein protocol, I think is fine with Hashimoto's. And I do think this is going to be individualized. So I don't want to make this as a general rule of thumb. Your body will always tell you. But when a person is struggling with Hashimoto's, we want to make sure, gluten-free is a great option. Sometimes dairy-free is a great option, because when we're talking about autoimmune conditions, we need to start thinking about leaky gut and food sensitivities. So there's a level of, restricting carbs and calories, and we're trying to heal. So I don't want to give a specific yes or no answer to this, because I do think it's individualized, because often there's, a person may have other issues going on. But if I hear Hashimoto's, I'm potentially going to be curious about their adrenal health also, because likely if it's a new diagnosis of Hashimoto's, this is probably not new. So what happens when we've been struggling with low thyroid function for quite a while is the adrenals tend to kind of get bogged down or lessened too. So sometimes the more restrictive plans can actually backfire on us. So this is where the individual would really want to pay close attention to their body. And it may not be wise to go so low carb. But there are, if somebody's doing well on the plan, the phase 1 protocol, it may be wise to add in some certain specific nutrients to help the adrenal and the thyroid while they're on protocol. But then there's a different part that happens after protocol, because if we're not paying close attention and supporting, our body for overall health, not just weight loss, but overall health, it's going to be really difficult to keep that weight off when they transition off the plan. And I don't say that as a negative. I say it as a potential empowerment to know that there needs to be a plan of action afterwards in order to, again, support the body for overall health. But it's when we have an autoimmune, we really need to think of ourselves as not having a weight problem. We need to think of ourselves as needing, overall holistic health to improve and calm down that immune system. But I once had Hashimoto's, and I do not have Hashimoto's anymore. So,
which I love that we're able, because we're told that once you have this, you're always going to have it. And what we do know now is that there are, you may not fix something totally, but you can actually reverse these situations. You can, take them from high level to, very low level where they don't bother you any longer. And so I want to go back to where we're talking about, you've now been on, and it doesn't matter what program it is, where we happen to, I'm an ideal protein coach, and Sherie was also, and so we know that protocol. But that protocol, if you're watching and you're not familiar, that protocol is fairly low carbohydrate. It's a medically supervised meal plan. And so you had this great success, and whereas you weren't able to lose weight at all with anything else you were doing, and all of a sudden, boom, you're cutting back your carbs, you're eating lean proteins, you're getting rid of the dairy, chances are a lot of the gluten went away. So you're having all these great results, and then you get to your goal, and then you start gaining weight again. So what should we be putting into place to not only number one, we're aware, because we know that we have this autoimmune situation, but for people that have no idea because they've always been diagnosed normal, how do we maybe advise them? How do you advise your clients that are now going to switch out of weight loss into lifestyle, and where to go from there?
Well, first of all, when I'm meeting with clients, what I have them do is, if they have access to a set of labs that I recommend. I'd love to get those. Now, as a health coach, I cannot diagnose, treat, or prescribe anything, and that's not the purpose of this. What I do is I have several page long symptom profile, which looks at adrenal, progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, thyroid, yeast overgrowth. So it kind of covers a whole gamut of information for me to kind of get an overall look at this person. Again, I'm not diagnosing or anything. I'm just kind of painting a picture in my head of what this person is experiencing. Because when we do have the diagnosis of particularly Hashimoto's, but an autoimmune condition, we have to be a little more subtle in what we do, particularly if somebody's going to put in some supplements, to support their body. Because there can be a strong detox reaction. If anybody's done any kind of diet ever, they're familiar with, a detox reaction. But sometimes this can be very strong in people that do have an autoimmune attack going on. And some people don't know they have an autoimmune. They've never been diagnosed, even though they have the symptoms. So what I do is I look at these symptoms. So like hypothyroidism, or a thyroid problem, let me just say it that way. A thyroid problem can present all across the body because the body cellularly has thyroid receptors on every single cell in the human body. So there's no body part that needs to be deficient in thyroid hormone if you want to keep it well. So if we do have that normal thyroid, this is why we have a whole lot of problems all over the body. But the test can be normal. So you can start suffering from the brain down before the test, actually comes back normal. But I would love to have labs, and I have a recommended lab list in my Facebook group, which is Recontrol Health and Lifestyle. There's a link to it on my Facebook page, Recontrol Health. That if they can get their prescriber, their practitioner to run these tests, that would be fantastic. But if they can't, then what we do is we go and just do the symptom profile list, which again is also on my website. And we sit down and we talk, and I learn from them. I want to know what their life's about, what kind of, if they've had trauma in their life. I want to know, I just take a lot of information at that. People are like, I'm so tired of writing after they filled out my forms. But I tell them, I promise there's a method, to this madness. I'm not just, having you do all this work for nothing. There's a point, and we can actually find a lot of information just based on somebody's symptoms. But let me reiterate, I'm not here to diagnose, treat, or prescribe. I'm here to support them. So my role is to find out what their issues that they're struggling with primarily, and provide them those resources so that they can then apply that to their life. So, I do carry some supplements here, so they've got easy access to it if they so choose to use those. But we want to make sure that we're focusing on improving the immune system as a whole. And this is where vitamin D comes into play. Vitamin D across the board is such a problem today, and I cannot tell you why. I do not know why this is, but since I've been looking at labs for the past 10 years, I have never once seen somebody in optimal levels unless they have been taking it and dosing it appropriately and then came back to be rechecked. But never ever once have I seen somebody in optimal levels, and most lab reference ranges are going to be from 30 to 100. And so people are, in the low 30s. I think the highest I've ever seen once was about 50. And for some people that would technically it is normal, but optimal, we want to see way on up that board. But this alone, this one deficiency can leave us susceptible to autoimmune diseases and breast cancer, any reproductive cancer, but any of the top cancers that we're, when you look up the top 10 list of cancers today in America, vitamin D is going to be just one of those known deficiencies, but it is prominent in women with breast cancer or that will be diagnosed with breast cancer. For men, we're talking breast and prostate. So you will likely be deficient in vitamin D if you have a diagnosis of any autoimmune, but particularly Hashimoto's. So that is one test that I recommend everyone know that number immediately. Going into summer or spring is actually when we'll be at our lowest level. After summer, you should technically be at your highest level because you've had more sun exposure based on where you live. But this is, again, where normal. Don't walk out with a normal diagnosis of vitamin D. Everybody, when they have labs ran from their practitioner, should leave with a copy of their labs at all times, every time. If you don't have them in your access right now, I urge you to call your practitioner and ask them that, or just tell them, say, I'd like to come by in a couple of days to pick up my last 3 labs that we've ran, and give them a little time, but they're yours. You own those labs, and keep them in your record so you can see your own trending report. And this is where, like Roby Mitchell, I know you've interviewed him before, recommends a set of labs called weather reports. And it's called weather reports because we're looking to see whether you're on the right track or not. Because why wait till we have a diagnosis when we can do something when we're transitioning towards the potential diagnosis, like people, doing the ideal protein plan is, it's a great plan for reducing A1C, blood sugar, or even potentially, reversing type 2 diabetes, prediabetes. We know this, we've seen it. I've seen it multiple times in my own clinic, where people have to stop, with their practitioner's permission, stop using their metformin or their other, blood sugar lowering medication, because it happens quite quickly when we follow the right protocol. But speaking of that, there's a very common, what am I trying to say here? There's a very high risk of people with prediabetes or headed down that road of type 2 diabetes that actually do have a thyroid problem. So I always associate low thyroid with type 2 diabetes or prediabetes, because it literally means your body is not utilizing the energy, the glucose, appropriately, and it requires insulin and thyroid to do that. So if thyroid's not on board, insulin's having to do double shift, and you can't lose weight when insulin is sky high. And over time, what happens is, we know as ideal protein coaches, you can't go into fat burning mode when your insulin, is up. So there's that vicious cycle of you're trying to diet, can't, but if you don't have thyroid on board to help your insulin put that energy into the human cell so you can get up and go, you'll struggle that battle forever, and it's not worth it. But I'm not sure if I actually answered your question, Renee.
Yeah, no, you absolutely did. And I love that you said that if one thing is not on board, the other thing can't do its job, and that's where we find that we're just struggling all the time. So one thing that I do recommend is, I love that you talked about the labs, and as Sherie said, is this isn't, a lot of people and a lot of my clients will tell me, well, my insurance doesn't pay for that. Look, insurance is exactly what it's for. It's for an emergency. And we have to invest in our health. Talking about vitamin D, Deb, and I'm going to talk a minute about how Sherie helped me this last fall. But Deb says, can the sun naturally help? And of course, yes, the sun can naturally help, but if we're not absorbing the vitamin D, and that's a whole nother angle of autoimmune stuff, if we're not able to absorb the vitamin D, whether we're ingesting it through foods or getting it through the sun, then our vitamin D levels are going to be tanked. And so last fall, I was just feeling low energy. And, Sherie and I have been talking off and on for a couple of years, trying to get her on my show. And so I said to her, look, I'm just really feeling crappy. I'd love to do a remote appointment with you. So, and of course, like she said, she doesn't diagnose people. She'll help you read your own labs. So you order your labs, and both Sherie and I can give you links on where you can order labs at. But I ordered my labs, and we had a phone appointment, and she was able to go over the labs and help me understand them. And then, my vitamin D was low and lower. And of course, I live out in California. And not only do I live in California, I'm golfing all the time. I'm hiking all the time. And this was right after summer. I had spent a ton of time out in the air and sun every day, and with a tank top on and all of that stuff. So it wasn't that. It's that I have problems with malabsorption just due to my digestive system, from a leaky gut issue, from a mercury issue, from autoimmune issues. I have all these things going on. So I'll tell you what I ended up doing. And, Sherie told me, she said, you might want to try liquid vitamin D. And I brought my little liquid vitamin D bottle and I use this pure encapsulations. And if you go on my website, you can look under my favorite things, and there's a link to it. But I started out with a high dose of that. And I did a lot of, not only after talking to you, Sherie, I did a bunch of reading, like, what does this mean? And so I did about 3 days of, each dropper is about 1,000, is it milligrams? Okay. And so I dropped it. I did 25 drops on my tongue for 3 days in a row. And then after that, I did about 10 drops which is 10,000 for, I don't know, about a month or so. And then now I do about 7. Oh my goodness, my energy, everything completely changed within 4 weeks. And it was dramatic to me. Like, I know when my hormones are off, I know when my thyroid is off, but it never occurred to me how dramatically my vitamin D level could be off, and how that would affect me.
Yeah, it's quite significant. I mean, you can have people that have severe joint pain. They just hurt all over. And it really can just be a vitamin D deficiency. Often it's not only a vitamin D deficiency, but it's quite likely that it will play a part in why somebody's having significant pain. But it is, most people know, it has to do with bone health, but I don't think a lot of people are aware how significant it is for the overall immune system. So it's imperative, and chronic disease and just illness, just unwellness is just rampant in our society today. I mean, I live in Mississippi again. We're not known for our healthiness here. So I am right on the front line, so to speak, of seeing the issues involved with it. But that being said, the question, the sun, ideally, yes, that would be perfect. However, we're not finding that is working well enough. I mean, unless somebody lived near the equator and they were adapted to that, possibly. And I'm not knocking it. Please try it first, because there are people out there that just are anti-vitamin D supplement. But I have not found that, from clinical or personal experience or any of the functional practitioners that I work with, I've not found that to be an issue at all for anyone with supplementing. And it is about appropriate supplementation and the follow-up to make sure that you know your levels when supplementing. But most practitioners are very fearful of overdose on vitamin D, when honestly, we should be more fearful of the having too little vitamin D, because that is what we see. I've only one time in 10 years seen somebody with too high levels of vitamin D, one time. And that was literally, they were taking so much that, it was almost intentional. It wasn't, but they had multiple, supplements that they were using at a time. They just got really excited and gung-ho and over supplementing on a lot of different things that had it in there. And so, but I mean, she was in the 120s, and I think it was 128 if I remember correctly, but she just stopped supplementing with it. And in 2 months, it was back down to that optimal level. But we really, really should be very cautious and fearful of too little, not too much, because that is what's going on. So, but we need to find our own optimal dose, but know your numbers, because it really can impact overall health significantly. Because remember, we're talking about immune system. When our immune system's not well nourished with certain nutrients, and vitamin D is one of those, we have our own little war going on in our body that's trying to fight off, incoming pathogens and the yeast and the bacteria and virus and anything that's kind of always coming into us. There's no real season, we want to call flu season, but it's always here. There's always virus and bacteria and fungus and parasites. I mean, they're always available. So our body is constantly on the fight for us, for our advantage. But when it is undernourished, it's really struggling trying to keep up its job, which is to keep us well so we can keep going. So when it's having to struggle with that fight, what's going to happen is our energy is going to go down, because it's trying to use that energy to literally keep us alive. Our body is really not created to make us and keep us well. It's created to keep us alive and to be able to heal. It's our job to keep us well and healthy and happy. But the body is total survival, total, get out of the danger and just stay alive. But we, especially, in our life we live today, the modern advantages and technologies that we have, running water is, pretty powerful when it comes to the immune system, indoor plumbing. It's up to us to keep our body well long throughout our life. I mean, we should not just, I think it's Dr. Christiane Northrup, and I'm not sure if it's her original quote, but she said, the goal is not to die old. The goal is to die young, as late as possible. And that's kind of a motto I live by, is it's not about the number on the scale. It really, truly is about overall health. And if your energy is low, that's a red flag, not a little yellow flag that we need to pay attention. Like, it is a big wake up call. If we don't have the energy to get up and do life, our body does not have the energy to provide what we need to do life. And so our immune system is compromised. We don't think clear. We're struggling. So even though it's a common problem, the chronic fatigue that we're facing today, it is absolutely not normal. And that goes for any age, from the youngest to the oldest. Chronic fatigue is not normal. And it really is a warning sign to get with somebody that can help you figure out what's going on, because it does lead to some pretty significant problems, because often it's due to nutritional deficiencies and or toxicities. Often when people reach that level, it's going to be both the deficiencies and the toxicity. So it's something worth knowing. So I do encourage everybody to find that recommended lab list, and especially ask for vitamin D. That should be a normal test that's ran.
Yeah, Sherie, is there a link on your website that tells people what kind of labs they can run, or do you have that available?
It's actually, I can link it to the top of my Facebook group. I have it in there, so I can put it in the highlight. But
if you would put it in the comments section here after we get off, and that way people can figure out, look, I can go to my local lab and get this test done. And one thing to know is Sherie does remote coaching and help. So if it's something that you want to do yourself and want to just kind of figure out where you should be, where you're at today, and then maybe get some advice on what kind of practitioner you should look for in your area, or working with Sherie on a different, some kind of health level, you're welcome. Her website is listed here, and I put it up on the screen, and I'll also include it in the comments section. Any last little tips on, now one last question from me. Are men's and women's symptoms the same? And one thing I do before you answer that, I do want to say, I think the thing that we most don't understand is that just because we're aging doesn't mean we're supposed to become exhausted and overweight and feel crappy. So, a lot of times I hear, well, I'm getting older. Well, I've taken on this weight because I'm in menopause. Well, honestly, you do not. I come from a long line of diabetic, overweight ladies that were my relatives and still are my relatives. And, I changed that factor for myself. I chose not to go down that road because I was heading down that road and 200 pounds by the time I hit 25 years old. So go ahead and let's just, we have just a few more minutes left. If you have questions, please put them in the comments section. And of course, if you're watching this in the replay, give us a hashtag replay and put your questions in there, and Sherie and myself can come back and give you some help there. And you can always send Sherie a private message also. So one last thing, are women and men the same diagnoses?
For women and men, they're often going to have similar symptoms when it comes to low thyroid function. Women are more susceptible because of the estrogen component. So estrogen does play a role because it will lower thyroid function. That being said, then one of the main nutrients required for optimal thyroid helps to balance estrogens. So this is where we start putting pieces together of looking at nutritional deficiencies, because if they are having estrogen dominance and symptoms of hypothyroidism, there's likely that nutritional factor that we're talking about here. So it's going to be very similar as far as the symptoms go. And anybody can Google hypothyroid symptoms. They're all over the internet. They're all true. But men can experience erectile dysfunction, which is quite significant in their life. And it has to do, with circulation. If you don't have the energy to get up during the day to do life well, that circulation's not going to be optimal either. And we need a vital circulation for bedroom health, and so that for men, I'm smiling because that often will get men to go to the doctor. They're not, they've had multiple symptoms of other things leading up to that, but this is like, okay, this, kind of draws the line. But across the board, it's going to be very similar symptoms. Women are going to have the female problems, men are going to have the male problems, but that's really the only difference. But just remember that the thyroid impacts every single part of the body. There's no part that's not helped or harmed by having thyroid or not having thyroid. So it's from the head to literally the toes. I mean, people can have, the common common complaints are, constipation, weight. Weight's always an issue. For women, hair loss. It's true for men too. Losing the outer third part of your eyebrows, because we don't need that. So energy is not going to go to those places. Your fingernails are going to be dry and brittle. Your skin's going to start to deteriorate. Acne can be part of that. Wrinkling, again, the dryness. But even, yeast infections or, jock itch or toenail infections, fingernail infections, swelling in the extremities, but depression quite significantly, because we have a problem in this country of people suffering with depression. And instead of looking at nutritional deficiencies and thyroid health because they're normal, they're offered, an antidepressant, which comes with its own host of problems too. So again, time and a place for that. But ultimately, if most of us, I don't know anybody that's deficient in an actual antidepressant, but we can have the deficiencies that cause us to become depressed or have the mental fog or, the low energy associated with it. So yes, it's going to be the same, even, anemia, low stomach acid, GERD is really what GERD is low stomach acid. Digestive complaints. Every time you eat, you bloat or gassy. You feel like you're not digesting your food well. All of that is linked to the thyroid because that requires a significant amount of energy to digest your food. So again, if you don't have the energy to get up every day and do your day, you're likely not going to have energy to really digest your food, which means break that down so that it's absorbable, which then leads to more nutritional deficiencies because you're not utilizing the actual food you're taking in. So I specialize in digestive health and thyroid primarily because I have discovered that it starts with one and the other one's going to follow. At the point when they come to see me, it really doesn't matter which came first. They're both likely involved at that point, whether they're aware of it or not, because they feed off each other. It's about nutritional deficiencies. It's always about nutritional deficiencies, or at least toxicities. If somebody knows that they've had, an exposure, a biotoxin or a mold exposure, which is very underdiagnosed today with overgrowth, it's called sick building syndrome. You won't lose weight if you have been exposed to mold, or you're losing it too quickly, which is another red flag when you're not trying to lose weight and you're losing. So I like to focus on, just overall health primarily. But it just breaks my heart because I lived through it. And so, that's kind of my mission statement today, is to get the information out there that invest, find a practitioner that you can work with, or, even somebody like me that can teach, but invest in knowing what's going on with yourself. Invest in your actual health. Like you said earlier, insurance often does pay for our sickness, but it's not really there to promote actual health. And I know that seems harsh because I've had somebody say, well, antibiotics, but antibiotics don't tell you why you got the infection in the first place. I mean, the immune system was down, but after we take the antibiotics, then the immune system's even lower. So we're still not dealing with, prevention or overall health when we're talking about antibiotics. So the message is know your body. You're the expert. Don't let anybody talk you out of your symptoms. It's not in your head. Trust yourself. And nobody needs to understand, but you need to know yourself and then find somebody that's willing to work with you and help you. I tell people all the time, they're likely to give up on themselves before I will, but I can't do it for them. I can't put more of myself into their healing than they want it for themselves. It just doesn't work. But I'm in, if they're in, that's what I'm here for. And if, there's a few times where somebody has reached out to me for help and I'm not their first best option. And I will tell them that. I can, refer to a medical practitioner, But if there is something that I can do to get them started, I'm in and I'm going to help them. But there is a level to which they may need, to find that medical practitioner that takes them that next step. These are particularly people that are on a lot of different medications that could be interacting. That gets tricky. Or the case where I've had a few people that had mold exposure, and if that's not treated quite quickly, that can be very, very dangerous. So, and symptoms will tell you that too. Yeah, symptoms will tell you that. So know your body, trust your symptoms, and don't let anybody talk you out of it. But healing is an option. Healing's an option.
Yeah, and everybody can heal, and even if you're in the worst condition and you think you give up, just advocate for yourself. We all have to advocate for ourselves. Sherie, this has been wonderful, and I finally got you on my show. So I know that it's going to take me a while to get you back, but I would love to focus on digestive health. Sherie's a busy girl. So yeah, we'll try to get that going. And for all of you that have taken the time to listen today, if you have questions, you're welcome to private message Sherie or myself. We'll put some links in the comments section that will help you to find Sherie, to find a place where you can do your own labs, and to maybe do you have a health profile online, Sherie, that they could even download?
Yes, it's the symptom profile. It's on my website, Recontrol Health. There's a Bally tab. That's where all the Dr. Fit, Ruby Mitchell stuff is. And that's, he's been my biggest mentor, helping. He makes me look so smart. So it's getting back to this intelligent design of the body, and he teaches in a way that really just makes sense to the common person. But the information is one thing. We must apply it. It's our responsibility to apply it to our own life. Nobody can do that for us. I would love if they could. It would make things so much simpler, but that's just not true. I have to do it. I'm not just a do what I say kind of person. I'm doing it with you. I'm very familiar with what they're experiencing. So
we're in this because we've been through it.
Absolutely. Still in it that time.
And trying to keep it all minimized, right? All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Sherie, it has been wonderful. So appreciate it. And talk to all of you soon.
All right, thank you.
Have a great